I'm going to say this before I watch it. I got a lot of crap for just sharing my feelings around structural salvage and the changes.
Yes, but it's also good that other people voice their opinions too, even if it's in opposition with you, just so that everything's not one-sided and skewed towards a certain direction. And your voice kind of holds a lot of clout in the SC community. I know a lot of people kind of hear it as the gospel, so it's good to hear other opinions from people who might be salvaging mains. Hi, I'm Esper, and I am a salvaging main. It is the profession that I chose inside of Star Citizen, and while even I made fun of it when it first came out because I thought it was rather boring, let me tell you what you're getting yourself into. The best way for me to explain it is the gameplay is kind of like playing power washing on an Etch-a-Sketch. This is what I like to do. It's something different from the bounty hunting and PvP that I constantly do inside the game. It gives me a break from that. It gives me something to do where I don't have to play a mini game or think about stuff. I can edit on another computer, or I can listen to some music or watch a show while I'm sitting there making UEC. So for that aspect, I really like it. It gives me something relaxing to do in game versus something intense to do like a PvP or a bounty hunting type mission. So I think it's important for other people's opinions to be heard as well, because I've been alpha and beta testing games, specifically MMOs, for over 2 decades now, and I've seen a lot of things happen that weren't necessarily great for the game. One of the more recent ones was New World, a game by Amazon Games that was a great PvP system, open world, built around territories and an Azoth teleporting system so that you could get around that world. And once the streamers and people who were very WoW-based players started coming in and making comments on the game, they wanted it more like that. So they wanted instance dungeons and they wanted mounts, which just didn't make any sense for what the game was supposed to be and what we had alpha and beta tested, for years prior. So when that came into play, I watched my clan of like over 100 people just sort of disappear and disperse. I watched all my competitors that were good PvPers sort of just leave the game within 6 to 8 months once it started taking these turns. And those people had just like all sat back and just kind of let it happen. We weren't the loud voices in the community. We were not the people who were up on stream and saying those things. So I want to speak as a salvager in order to better this gameplay loop. It's something that I'm passionate about and I like doing. So let's get into it. One of the main things that one of my teachers in high school ever said to me was, don't ever come to me with a problem. Come to me with a solution, and I'll tell you why that solution will or won't work. It's very good advice, and that's what we're going to do here. Is we're going to kind of go over the salvaging system of what it is now in 3.22 in this EPTU state, so it's still in testing, so that we can make it better for the future for us salvagers.
We have to constantly be weighing up, trying to perfect a feature, which could take years, or trying to get something playable in players' hands so that we can start getting feedback from it and learning from it and figuring out how it fits in with the rest of the game.
So first off, I don't really understand why it's even possible to disintegrate an entire ship. Pushing! No Beltalote in their right mind would disintegrate an entire ship. I don't think that that's a good order of operations to have on this gameplay loop. And in here I'll go over why I think it should be changed and how it'll sort of fit into what I'm envisioning. Like when I watched all the other munching videos, I never thought it was ever going to be possible to munch something before it was stripped.
We want to encourage you to use the hull scraping first so you don't lose the RMC in the process.
Which is higher value per SEU than construction materials.
All right, well, let's look at another way that we can encourage players to do this in a gameplay loop that sort of makes a little bit more sense as a salvager. Right now, in the current state of 3.22 in the EPTU, I don't really like disintegrating things. I'll just move on to the next contract. The reason being, one, I'm not going to fill up my small Vulture with things that aren't as valuable to me. It just doesn't make sense. And two, if I'm in the reclaimer, I'm not going to make one of my laser guys get out and start fracturing stuff. We'll just move on to the next thing and start collecting recycled materials off of that as well. If it is something that I want to do, I won't bother scraping. So I'll just go and hope that I can get some nice cargo out of the back of whatever ship that I'm salvaging, put that in the reclaimer, and then just disintegrate the whole ship and move on to the next one. So either way, it doesn't really feel like it fits into the gameplay loop. It feels like it's something completely separate to me. It feels like, well, you want to do this or do you want to do that? And there's just no reason to do both. So for that, I think that we can sort of switch things up and make it a lot better. So first off, I think we should make it to where someone needs to salvage 75 to 80% of the ship before they can even go in and fracture and disintegrate the ship. And the reason that I'm saying that also ties into the rest of the things in this gameplay loop. I know that it's possible because you guys already have a progress bar at the top of the screen whenever you're salvaging something, and you really just need to engage whatever that mechanic is when somebody starts salvaging a ship.
Now they moved to the pricing changes on RMC versus construction materials. I think that's going to work really well.
Second off, I think that we should make the construction material more valuable than the recycled material. If we do the having to scrape the hull first, this not only alleviates some of the PvP problems that we'll get into in a little bit, but this also makes you want to scrape the entire thing first so that you can get to that construction material, that more valuable material. And another reason that I like this gameplay is because currently in 3.21, what I do is I'll take a contract, I'll go out in the Vulture, I'll see what kind of cargo is already in the back of whatever ship it is that I chose to go salvage, and then I have to decide whether I want to take all of that cargo in the back or whether I want my RMC. I usually can't do both because there's not enough room inside the Vulture. Now in the EPTU, with the new system that you guys have with having the internal storage, I can do both. Like, I don't have to leave anything behind. And while I'm not complaining about it because I like having more loot, I think that that's great for Vulture players. I think there needs to be something more for the Reclaimer and more of a reason to take the Reclaimer out.
The second seat of the Reclaimer is a bit boring. The Vulture, pretty damn good job.
One of the distinctions with the Reclaimer, though, is that it can break apart basically any size target, whereas the Vulture is limited to only up to a certain size of ship.
So currently anything above, I think it's the Star Runner, can't be fractured by the Vulture, which is something you would need the Reclaimer to fracture. So if you can find one of these big wrecks, obviously there's a lot of material to be gained from this, which means obviously more SCU to be sold at the end, which is vastly more profit. We like to think that it would be more profitable to do this than the Vulture, but obviously the Vulture is still very much convenient.
So okay, that's great. The Reclaimer can break down larger ships, but what's the advantage of it? Why would you even want to disintegrate a ship in the Reclaimer? Like, you need to make the construction materials worth more. So that way there's an advantage of the Reclaimer can go out and it can actually get way more construction material, which is a higher value material than the recycled material, and bring that back in. This ups the value of the Reclaimer a lot more and makes you want to get a crew to be able to go out and do those things because you're pulling in more money. And it actually gives a reason for somebody to be sitting in that cloth seat, whereas right now it's not very fun and there's no really reason to be doing it. But this follows the cardinal rule of more money, more problems, so that you can stick somebody in that seat and justify it with, yo man, we're about to make it some serious money if you sit in that cloth seat and disintegrate the ship.
We wanted to make sure that the resonance field wasn't going to create opportunities for griefing, so we've taken the precautions a step further from hull scraping, which requires that the target's shields are off, to structural salvage requiring that the ship's power is entirely off.
So with smaller ships, this might not really alleviate the problem with PvP, but it'll definitely help out the larger ships. Something like a hammerhead that's got a lot of people inside of it. I've been a part of a lot of PvP communities, and I guarantee you that people will find a way using distortions and EMPs to shut down a large ship quickly, and then within that 60-second period have their friend that's following them along just disintegrate the entire ship, which kills everybody inside. And I think that if we do it where you've got to salvage and scrape first, you've at least got the ability to abandon ship while they're trying to, scrape your hull, or you can send out that military service beacon to try and get some help while your ship is sitting there disabled. And if that's the gameplay loop that people are doing on it, there's going to be way more efficient ways for people to try and take out ships. Well, people won't even be attempting this because it won't be worth their time to try it. They might still have like a salvaging crew to come in and clean up whatever it is that they're pirating, but it's not going to be their main focus on how they can actually grief or take out somebody's ship. So I like the idea of the mini game that Torsten had brought up on Spectrum, where your distance sort of determines how much materials you're going to get from something that you disintegrate. I think it's a great alternative to, say, like the mining gameplay where you constantly have to sit there and adjust to stay inside of a meter. I think that's great gameplay for mining. I think it was really inventive and very engaging. So I think that was great for mining, but that's mining and this is salvaging. And I wanted to sort of keep that laid-back gameplay style that was supposed to be salvaging. And I think that this is sort of a great alternative. It gives you something a little bit more to think about when you're disintegrating something and the values that you're getting in return. I haven't got to mess around with the values that much. Like, I haven't really seen what those are. But as a player, I feel like if you're in that sweet spot, maybe you should get like, a little bit of a bonus. But if you're a little bit outside of it, say like in the yellow, if you will, then you don't really have too much of a drop off. However, if you're like very close or very far away to the point where you're not anywhere near that you're in the red or whatever, that should have like a much larger drop off versus, being a little bit outside of it. Another way that I feel like we could improve that claw gameplay some is to have, when it's fully extended, have it sort of on a gimbal system to where that co-pilot can move it a little bit to the left and the right, just so that they can interact with the people on the tractor beams who are pulling stuff over a little bit more and not just be so stationary and just pushing one button. I think that'll make it a little bit more engaging. So another way I feel like we could improve on the salvaging gameplay loop is by making a little bit more explorable gameplay inside of the MSR and larger ships when you go out to salvage them. So when you go in, not just look for the cargo that's in the back, but look around the ship for food and water or armor or weapons or ammunition so that you can have those things with you. This will really enhance the gameplay once we start getting into Pyro and we're like out in deep space. Getting food and supplies and stuff off of salvaged ships while we're out there will let us stay out there longer versus having to come back and feed ourselves, and who knows what the hygiene system's going to bring. So I really like that idea to sort of give you a little bit more time and things to do on these larger ships when you go out to salvage them, just to sort of pull in more things that you may or may not need. You can choose whether you want to go out and do them or not. I suggest that you make these boxes or items also disintegrate or disappear when the ship is disintegrated. That way people aren't just disintegrating the ship and then picking up the leftover loot boxes afterwards, and that'll sort of alleviate that problem. And with that, I think that we should also start thinking about Pyro in the gameplay. So when you're in Stanton and you're salvaging things, the cargo and stuff that you find in the back of these ships, will be more legal things like ores and medical supplies and things like that. You won't find drugs very often or at all in Stanton on cargo missions. I do like them in the bounty hunting missions. I think that's a great idea to put them in there in the bounty hunting missions just because they're already illegal NPCs, so it makes sense that they've got something illegal on them as well. And then it also gives, a little salvaging or cargo crew a reason to follow their bounty hunting friends around and sort of pick up the pieces after they're done blowing them out of the sky. So when you get out into Pyro and you start salvaging these contracts, you're more likely to find drugs and stuff on these ships. So there's more of a reason for you to go out and salvage in Pyro versus salvaging in Stanton, because when you go out to Pyro, you're making a lot more money because not only are you salvaging the ships, but you're pulling in a bunch of drugs as well. And that'll sort of balance the weight between having an unlawful system and a lawful system of where you're going. So you've got more risk, more reward out in Pyro versus salvaging in Stanton. So I hope you can take some of these ideas and actually incorporate them into what our current salvaging system is now. And thanks for listening.